Now, let's do a really quick tip. What I want to do is I want to be able to put this text behind his head and behind parts of his arm. So what I want to do this is I'm going to turn off the text layer and I'm going to go to the bottom layer where the photo is at. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up to my selection tool, so the quick select. I'm going to go ahead and choose select subject. Now this does a pretty good job of making the selection. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here over by the microphone. I don't need the microphone, so I'm going to grab the lasso and I'm going to hold down the Option key. Remember, the Option key allows you to subtract when you're using a selection tool. And I'm going to go ahead and just highlight around the entire lasso so it no longer has that part selected. Now I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to add to my selection. Oftentimes around the edges, like the hands and different things like that, it will miss it because it's slightly blurred out. So I'm going to switch to my regular lasso, hold down my Shift key, that will add, and just go around and add anything that's missing or subtract things you don't want. Like press the Option key to subtract when you drag. Remember, you don't have to trace the entire thing. You can do it in smaller bits if you want. And if you end up going too far, remember, just switch to your Shift key, drag around. So I'm actually going to get a little bit tighter on this. So I kind of trim that part off, and then I'm going to go in just a little bit tighter. There we go. Work my way around the rest of his arm. Check to see if everything's set there. That's looking pretty good. All right, excellent. So this is going to be, just, like I said, a quick one. It's going to be relatively rough, but we'll have that set. So now that the subject is selected, I can come back up here and turn on my text layer and select the text layer. I'm now going to make a mask. So since I've made a selection already, when you do a mask, what it will do is it will automatically fill in with white the area you have selected, and then it'll automatically put black in for the area outside. Now I want the exact opposite. So with this mask selected, I can either click on invert right here, or I can press Command I. And what that does is it flips the colors and it does the opposite on the mask. So whatever used to be white is now black. Whatever used to be black is now white. Now, I want to be able, that's kind of cool. That's awesome that I'm able to get it behind his head. But what if I wanted to move this down? If I take this and I start to move down, see, it's not hiding behind him. Let me show you the magic. So in between the text layer and the mask, there is a little lock. If I turn this lock off and I select just the mask, what you'll find is the mask is moving on its own. I'm going to undo, Command Z. Instead of having the mask selected, if I select the text layer now, see how there's a little white border? Now, when I move this around, it's moving as if it's behind the picture, even though it's on a layer above. So what I can do with this is I can move this around. Now, if I decide I can resize it, just grab the Shift key. I'm sorry, not the Shift key. I forgot they turned that off. You can resize this, and you can kind of move this around until it looks the way that you want. So with something like this, I'm trying not to cut off the leg of the R. So that's why I shrunk this down, because I think if it's there, it's too hard to tell what that says because you can't read that letter. If it's over here, it's helping a little bit, but then it kind of messes up this A. So I'm going to arrange this so that it's just slightly, it's giving me a little bit of the R. And the finger is pointing over Dream. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on the check mark there. I'm going to come back up here, turn the link back on so that if I move this around, actually I don't want to move it around. And then let's go ahead and add a quick little layer style to the text layer. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to do a little drop shadow. Now with the drop shadow, I think the drop shadow can look kind of cool, but I also think it looks kind of fuzzy. So when I choose drop shadow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the size a little bit closer, play around with the distance a little bit. One of the things with the drop shadow that's nice, and some of these effects, you can kind of drag these around. I want to be careful because now the drop shadow is showing up on his face, which is not really what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back down, and I'll show you the numbers you can use. So it's giving me this like little bit of an inner shadow kind of thing here. So I just did multiply 71%, negative 101, 5 for my distance, 0 for my spread, 1 for my size. And then let's go ahead and try like an inner shadow. Actually, no, let's try a gradient overlay. So with a gradient overlay, what's happening is it's right now, depending on your settings, because yours might be different, I'm going to go ahead and choose reset to default so I can see it. So that's closer to what you have. And then what I can do is I can come in here and I can click inside of the gradient editor. Now, there are pre-made gradients that are in here. So if I wanted to choose any of these, I could. There's colors, other things that are tucked in here. Depending on if you have these legacy gradients, these are ones that you'll see in tutorials a lot. These aren't that great. I mean, not really spectacular. But what we can do is we can just create our own gradient. So when you click on one of these gradient stops, I don't care what color you end up using, go ahead and choose a color. And then on the other side, choose another color. Or if you want to do a multicolor one, I'm totally fine with that. You can experiment with that a little bit. Key things with gradients is when you click underneath, you're adding gradient stops. If you don't want them there, just drag them off. So if I want to put something like this, these will change how quickly does it transition from one color to another. Those are what are known as the midpoint or the transition point. Stop it. I can kind of move those around a bit. I can click OK. I'm going to go ahead and change this to multiply. Actually, I'm not going to do multiply. Multiply looks kind of jacked up. Let's go ahead and leave that at normal for right now. And I'm going to drop the opacity just a little bit to kind of bring back some of the original color. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So what I've got is I've got a couple effects on here, but really the key thing that's nice is when I turn off the lock and I have the text selected, not the mask, it allows me to move this around and make it feel like it's actually behind this layer, although it's actually right on top. So that was a real quick one, just something to experiment with. Each subject's a little more complicated than others. Some are simpler, some are a little more complicated. So we'll be doing something like this when we do your magazine cover. Oftentimes you'll see part of the magazine masthead hidden behind the subject that's in the photo. And that's what we'll work on. I am not going to re-record this video because of that bell. I wasn't paying attention to the time. Go ahead and save this one, and we're done with this very quick way to be able to put text behind any subject in a photo.